We're in chapter 4. Well, we're going to start chapter 4. This is just kind of a little introduction to bring us to where we were. Chapter 4 is kind of like a capstone of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. It's kind of bringing all that we know about Nebuchadnezzar together. We first met him when he conquered Egypt at the Battle of Carchemish in 605 BC. At that time, Nebuchadnezzar was the commander of the Babylonian army and was gone against Egypt. In that same year that he defeated the Egyptians, his father Nabopolassar died, making him the king while he was in the field. On his way back from Babylon, he conquered Egypt's ally, Judah, and that's when we think that Daniel and his friends were taken hostage and taken into Babylon. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And thus begins the king's exposure to the God of Israel. Chapter 4 is the ultimate humbling of Babylon's great king before the God of Israel. Now, Babylon at that time, Nebuchadnezzar is the greatest king that the world has seen to that point, other than maybe Solomon. But God brings him to his knees in chapter 4. The first 3 chapters, we see Nebuchadnezzar as he meets the 4 Hebrew boys that he took from Jerusalem. In fact, the matter is, this is the chapter in all of these 12 chapters. This is the chapter that Nebuchadnezzar himself wrote. Chapter 4 was written by the king himself. So we might need a little more for that later. But it's giving witness to the whole world about the God of Israel. It not only just fits Nebuchadnezzar, but it even gives us a picture of a future king of Babylon that we see in the book of Revelation. It's kind of a shadow of things to come. In fact, the matter that's found that the king of Babylon is found in Revelation chapter 17 and 18. Beginning with chapter 4, verse 1, we read, Nebuchadnezzar the king, unto all people, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied unto you. This is the beginning of his personal testimony. I've got to thinking about testimony. Yeah. A lot of people are moved more by testimony of someone that has seen God move in their life than, So we ought not to be ashamed to give our testimony. Revelation says they overcame by the word of their testimony, the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. So we ought to be bold in standing up and say how much God has done for us. Come on. Mm-hmm. And this is what has happened. What is happening in chapter 4 is that Nebuchadnezzar is giving his testimony. Chapter 2 and 3, we see he's seeing the contrast between his God and the God of Israel. In chapter 2 and chapter 3, Daniel comes in chapter 2 and tells him his dream and then tells him the interpretation. Then we saw that in chapter 3 where the 3 Hebrew children were delivered. Now he's seen in comparison, he's seen his God up against the God of Israel, and he's recognized that the God of Israel is a lot greater than his God. The point is, up to this point, he has not accepted the God of Israel as his God. So God brings him to his knees in this chapter. Another thing about this letter, he's writing to the whole of the world that he controls. everybody is getting a letter that gives his testimony. In verse 2, he said, I thought it good to show the signs and wonders that the high God hath wrought toward me. Kind of neat to notice the wording. I thought it good to show the signs and the wonders that the high God hath wrought toward me. He's sending this proclamation out, kind of like a state declaration or a decree that's going out. And this is the second decree that Nebuchadnezzar has issued, exalting the God of Abraham, of Daniel and the three Hebrew children. Here's the neat thing to notice in this verse here. The Aramaic word that is used for God or gods, it means God or God is plural. That Aramaic word, Elah. Some imams say that this is one of the word places in the Hebrew Bible that you see Allah mentioned. But it's not. It doesn't mean. It means a god or gods. It can be in the plural. But what he does is he adds another word to it, Elahi, which means supreme or highest. So he said, recognizing as he starts out, it's God, but it's the highest God. Which is kind of neat to notice that he, through all of his experience now, has realized that the God that he's talking about is not just an ordinary God. He's still talking about his gods, in relation to what he's been worshiping over the years. But he's saying this is the highest God. And he's going to bring it back to the point after he goes through his experience, that he recognizes that God is the God, the only God. He's the highest God. But kind of neat to know that I thought it good to show the signs and the wonders of the highest God. Come on. He said at one place, if you'll remember, one of the deliverance, he said, there's no other God can do like this. I mean, no other God can bring these guys out of the fiery furnace like this God. Verse 3. How great are his signs and how mighty are his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. How great are his signs. Now, he's seen two great signs. The first one being when Daniel was young and came in and interpreted the dream. But still, that wasn't enough to convert him to the God of Israel. He recognized the God of Israel, but didn't change. And then, of course, he saw the second one occurred years later, chapter 3, when he witnessed the deliverance of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But that's still not enough for him to convert to that God, to the God that he's seen demonstrate his power and everything. But in chapter 4, he experiences something in chapter 4 that causes him to change his mind and believe in and accept the God of Israel as his God. Amen. Yeah. Kingdom, he said, is an everlasting kingdom. Now this has messianic overtones because it's talking, his kingdom is a kingdom that is an everlasting kingdom, what I like about the words of Jesus when he says, the kingdom of God is not meat and drink, He said, and when he teaches us that the kingdom of God is in you, It's also mentioned in other places in Daniel. I think it's 2 times in chapter 7 one time in chapter 4, it mentions an everlasting kingdom. This is the stone in chapter 2 that destroys the statue that's in there. And then one day, God will set up a kingdom on this earth. And in the days of those kings shall the God of heaven set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. Note that term. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people. God's going to set up this kingdom, and it's not going to be left to other people, because if he leaves it to other people, it would get messed up. You know. And the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all those kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. You know, we looked at that. Also in the book of Psalms, in 145 verse 13, it says, "Thy kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and thy dominion endureth throughout all generations." So we're serving one who is everlasting. We're involved as part of the kingdom of God. It's going to be forever and ever, if there is such a phrase. I mean, it's like saying eternity to eternity. I mean, there's no such thing. It's just plain eternity. You know, you don't go from one to the other. You know, the word everlasting in the Hebrew part of the Bible is, if you look it up, it means from vanishing point to vanishing point. Everlasting is from vanishing point to vanishing point. And the way I relate to it is I think about when I was a kid out in West Texas.
Come on.
You know, driving high, you know, how some of the roads are just as straight, and you know, you can see what looks like the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's just straight. And you'd be driving, you know, and you'd think, well, it looks like I see the end of it. But when you get somewhere else down the road, that point is gone, and the road goes on, vanishing point to vanishing point. You know. Verse 4. I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in mine house and flourishing in my palace. So everything's going well. Nebuchadnezzar is at the height, and in a minute we'll talk about at what point in history that we're looking at. Right now this all is close to the end of the reign of Nebuchadnezzar. I know that a lot of times when we read it, we just think they're happening one right after the other. But this is close to the end of his reign. And he's about to admit his mistake. I think that's one thing about conversion, is you got to realize that you're wrong. You know. But he's about to admit his mistakes, or the mistakes that he's made. Even though he's had opportunities before to have been exposed to God, now he comes to the realization that, hey, I made a bunch of mistakes back here, and it's God that brings him to his knees in this chapter. He conquered and subdued all of the known world. He said, I'm at rest in my house, and everything's going great. You know, this is somewhere around the 34th or the 35th year of his reign. Okay, think with me. How old would Daniel be at this time, if we estimate it? Well, around 50, in his 50s, around there, somewhere like that. But remember, we talked about him, the word that was used for children to be somewhere around 14-year-olds, you know. And so if we add that to he's somewhere around 50 years old, maybe a little more, a little less, you know. So we're not talking about Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, and Daniel as little kids anymore. We're talking about them as men at this particular time. Of course, this has to do with Nebuchadnezzar's reign. He reigned from 605 to 562 BC, a total of about 43 years. Now, he died in his 80s. Nebuchadnezzar did, so he died a man of full years. The Babylon, one thing that Nebuchadnezzar did is when he took the throne and between the battles that he fought and all of that, he built Babylon. And what did he build Babylon? Mm-hmm. I mean, he was kind of like Herod. He was a builder. I mean, he built Babylon. Yeah. Burroughs, he describes the city of Babylon in his day and its splendor. This is his writing. That the city standeth on a broad plain, and in an exact square, 120 furlongs, about 13.63 miles, I think. It's in length each way, so that the entire circuit is 480 furlongs. A furlong is equal to 600 feet in length, a stadium. It is surrounded by a broad and deep moat full of water, behind which rises a wall 50 royal cubits in width, about 87 feet, according to his writing, and 200 cubits in height. That's 350 feet, that's high. At the top, along the edges of the wall, they constructed buildings of a single chamber facing one another, leaving between them room for a 4-horse chariot to turn. So, a 4-horse chariot can turn around on that wall, according to him. In the circuit of the wall are 100 gates, all of brass, with brazen lintels and side posts. The city is divided into 2 portions by the river, which runs through the midst of it. The river is the Euphrates, broad, deep, swift stream which begins in Armenia. We read in Revelation where the Euphrates River dries up. I guess, that Turkey has 5 dams on the Euphrates River. They can shut the water off any time, dried up. In reading the Bible, I always figured, I've heard the Euphrates, that's got to be another Amazon. I mean, yeah. But when I was over there every day, I drove a road that runs right along the Amazon from the Azore to El Ward, and really, the Amazon would make it look like a creek, And I've seen the Amazon, in the Amazon. There's a lot of places in the Amazon you can't see the bank if you're out in the middle of it. I mean, 1/5 of the world fresh water in the world runs out the mouth of the Amazon. So it's a big river. But I was surprised to see the river Euphrates being no bigger than it was. I mean, no wider than it was. In fact, it kind of amazed me. But anyway, he's describing it. The city wall is brought down on both sides to the edge of the stream. The houses are mostly 3 and 4 stories high. The streets all run in straight lines. Not only those parallel to the river, but also the cross streets which lead down to the water side. And that's from his writing. This is kind of a map. And look at all of the temples in the city in Babylon there. They got temples for everything in there. I never have counted them, but they're all over. Yes, sir.
I find it interesting that the city was an exact square, and so was the New Jerusalem when it came down from heaven, an exact square. I wonder what's up with that.
I don't know. Another shadow maybe. Another, you know. The devil's always duplicating something that God has done, you know. Abraham was saying, the Bible says Abraham searched for a city whose builder and maker was God. Some way Abraham had a view into eternity and knew about the city that God had prepared, you know. A city that hath foundations, whose builder and maker is God. And then you read in Revelation how many foundations that the city had, you know. Yeah.
But Nebuchadnezzar's fixing to be a believer.
That's right. That's right. He's fixing to. Anyway.
Yeah. Still think God moves on them.
But he was a builder, and he had built this city. He had palaces. He had palaces on both sides of the river. He revamped his father's palace because he called it dilapidated. You know, it wasn't good enough for him, so he redid his father's palace, and then after he finished with it, he decided it still wasn't good enough for him, so he built another palace there. And then he decided he wanted one on the other side of the river. No sense in him being locked in, you know, if he was on the other side of the river and wanted to go to bed, I mean, you know, get a palace here, there, and everywhere.
You know, the world.
But he was a builder, that's why he's here he gives us a picture. He said, I'm at ease. I'm at the height of my career. Then he has this dream, you know, which kind of rocks his boat.
Mm-hmm.
You know. In fact, it says it troubled him or made him afraid or really brought, you know. Here's the king of the known world at that time, and he is as rich can get, you know. He'd make Trump look like a pauper. I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts upon my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. So this is where we are. Then I saw a dream. This is the second recorded dream that he's had. The first took place in the second year of his reign around 602 BC in Daniel chapter 2. This dream takes place 32 years later, around 570 BC. So we kind of touched on that. He said the dream troubled him. And like the first dream, you know, I'm sure that these two dreams are not the only dream that he's ever dreamed. If he's like me, he dreams every night. And some of mine are really confusing dreams. I mean, you know, but I'm sure that this is not the only dream that he's ever dreamed, but these two have given him a lot of trouble. And again, he needs an answer. Therefore made I a decree. Now, when you're king, you can do that. You know, when you're king, when you need an answer, you can just, you know, you can just issue an executive order, I guess. But he said, therefore, I need an answer. I want an answer to this situation. He said, therefore, it made I a decree to bring in all of the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known unto me the interpretation of the dream. So he makes a decree, and wants all these guys to come in and tell him his dream. There's a difference in this, though. Mm-hmm. There's a difference in this dream, because in this dream, he's asking, he's going to tell the magicians his dream. Before he wanted them to tell him his dream and then tell him the interpretation. But it's a little easier for him now. It's a little easier for them now. Because then came in the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, the soothsayers, and I told them the dream. I told the dream before them. But they did not make known unto me the interpretation thereof. The wise men come in before the king, like before. Like before, he tells them the dream. Like before, they still couldn't interpret the dream. And as before, Daniel is not present at this time. Now, I don't understand why a decree goes out for all of the wise men to appear before him. A command goes out from the king, and Daniel's not included in that, except to say that the way the next verse, the way the verse where Daniel shows up states, it kind of implies that maybe Daniel was on his way but had not arrived, at that time. But they couldn't tell. It looks like the king would have learned. But maybe it being 35 years later, maybe he forgot that the magicians and the wise men and all that couldn't answer. Maybe he just forgotten in 35 years that they couldn't answer to supply what he needed on the first dream that he wanted. But that's highly unlikely, but it could have happened. But it calls the same bunch. Somebody said something about how does it go? The definition of stupidity is expecting a different answer. Well, that may be what's going on here. It just, but being king, and being a height, of his profession, he may thought things had changed. Then it says, but at last. I kind of noted that word. But at last, Daniel. But at last, Daniel came in before him. And it kind of implies that Daniel may have been on his way, but just had a lot further to go or something, But at last, Daniel came in before me, whose name is Belshazzar, according to the name of my God. See, he's still got his gods. At this point in his testimony, he's saying Daniel came in, whose name is Belshazzar, according to the name of my God, and in whom is the spirit of the holy gods, and before him I told the dream saying. So at last Daniel comes in. Now Daniel, here's something to note in this verse. He uses both names here. He's got a letter that's going out to all of the countries that he controls. He got this testimony that's going out, and he uses both names of Daniel. I think there's a reason. Daniel in Hebrew is Daniel's Hebrew name. It means God is my judge, and then Belshazzar, meaning may Bel, which is the Babylonian god, protect his life. And this letter's going out to everybody all over the country. And it may be that some might have known Daniel by Daniel, and some may have known him by his Babylonian name. So that may be the reason that he used both names in that sentence. So to make sure that what everybody knew who he was talking about and what he was talking about. Just a thought. So and the king does contrast him against his gods. He's got the spirit of the holy gods before him. I told the dream saying. So, O Belshazzar, but he uses a Hebrew name. O Belshazzar, master of magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in thee, and no secret troubleth thee. Tell me the visions of my dream that I have seen, and the interpretation thereof. Here's something to know. He acknowledged, he said, now for 35 years, Daniel has been in charge of all the wise men in the Babylonian government. Remember back when he interpreted the first dream, he put him in charge of. Here he acknowledges that fact. He's the master of, and the word master means the guy that's the head guy, you know. The master of magicians, because I know that the Spirit of the Holy God is in thee. So he's been in charge for 35 years now. Here's another thing to know in the wording of this. The Spirit of the Holy God. He uses that Aramaic word again, Allah, meaning God. But here he uses a different word connected with it. He uses this word Kadesh, meaning separate. See, he still acknowledges that Daniel God is separate from any god of the Babylonians. That he's not earlier he used the word with the word for God. He used the word that meant that he was highest. Now he's using one. He's separate. It's kind of neat to notice that he still recognized that Daniel's God is not anything like the Babylonian gods. You know, even though he had personally, it looked like, hey, wake up.
Yeah.
You know, I keep thinking, when you gonna wake up? He's used phrases like this, but, you know, in chapter 2 and 3 and everything, and now he's still using them in the early part of this. It's time for him to wake up, and he will, but God brings him to his knees before it happens. You know. Then he says, no secret troubleth thee. That word means difficult or bad. See, he knows that the Spirit of God in him, that there's not anything that's going to make it too. But yet we do find something that's noted when Daniel comes to the interpretation, because we do find that in the interpretation, the interpretation did trouble Daniel. You know. Not the knowing the interpretation itself troubled him. But anyway, so he says to Daniel, he says, tell me the visions of my dream that I have seen and the interpretation thereof. It seems here that he don't even bother to tell Daniel what the dream was. We know he told the magicians and the wise men. He told them what his dream was, but he goes and indicates here, tell me the visions of my dream that I have seen, and then the interpretation thereof. You know. But anyway, evidently he goes ahead and tells him because in the next verse. Let me back up a little bit. This is his kingdom. I'm going to bore you a little bit now. Well, I don't have time to bore you. There it is.